Hello and welcome to our IELTS Facebook Live session. I'm here with Emma Cosgrave, who is our IELTS specialist. I'm sure you must recognize her. She's done a lot of our Facebook posts, and I'm sure you found her advice quite helpful. She's going to be talking about the speaking test today. So she's going to give an overview of the test, and then she's going to go through each part one by one. If you have any questions during the session, just post them on our wall, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can in the session after she's done her session. I'm saying session a lot of times, repetition. So we're going to stay here for a few minutes while we wait for more people to join us on the feed. So Emma, what's the one question that you get asked a lot?
Hi, everyone. Well, I think probably the most common question I get asked is who sets the questions in the exam? So is it the examiner just thinking up questions, or is there another source? And the answer to that is that the examiner has a script and they have strict questions that they have to follow. That way it's fair for everyone and there's consistency and fairness across the board.
Oh, okay. And for those, we've also got a lot of comments from people who are taking the test tomorrow. Good luck if you're taking the test tomorrow. So the question we get asked is, what is your best advice for preparing for the test?
If you're taking the test tomorrow, I would say try to immerse yourself in good English for the rest of today. Reading, watching BBC documentaries on YouTube if you can, anything like that, and then get an early night tonight so that you're well rested and ready to do your best performance tomorrow.
So a good night's sleep.
A good night's sleep, yeah. Don't stay up all night trying to cram because it's not going to help you. A good night's sleep is going to be the best thing you can do.
How would you immerse yourself in English? Okay,
well, speak to everyone in English for the rest of the day, and just whether they understand you or not, just go for it. And try to watch some news broadcasts in English. Try to have a look on YouTube, not American movies, that kind of thing, but if you go onto the BBC websites, you'll be able to find plenty of clear English that just get your ears ready for the listening test, get yourself in the mood for speaking in English.
Oh, one of the things that's been asked is there a dress code for the speaking test?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. Something I was planning to talk about, so perfect. There is no dress code. So you need to wear something that you're comfortable in. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you feel like you ooze confidence and do your best work ever when you're wearing a formal suit, then wear it, as if you're going to the office. If you're more comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt, go for it. It's all about what you feel confident and comfortable in.
Excellent. All right. For those of you who just joined us, I'm here with Emma Cosgrave, who is our IELTS specialist. You might recognize her because she's done a lot of tips posts on our Facebook wall. Today, she's going to be talking about tips for the speaking test. So she's going to do an overview of the speaking test, and then she's going to run through each part one by one. And in between, if you have any questions at all about what she's been talking about, just post them on our wall, and we will collate as many of the questions as we can. And at the end of the session, we'll answer as many questions as we can. And for those, if we don't answer them during the live session, we'll try and get to them on our Facebook wall through comments. Now, don't worry if you've missed the beginning of the session, or if you come in halfway, or you've had to go away for whatever reason. The broadcast is being recorded, so it'll be on our Facebook page when we've done with the live session. Okay, I think we're about ready to go. So Emma, I'm about to hand over to you. You ready?
Okay.
Handing over to Emma.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, where are you calling in from, or where are you joining us from? I'm in the UK. It's very sunny today, but cold. So we're all wearing our jumpers, you'll see. But if you can just put in the comments where you're coming from, it'd be great. I'd love to know where you are. So let's start with an overview of the test, okay? So the IELTS speaking test takes about 15 minutes. It's the same if you're taking the academic paper or the general training paper. It's all exactly the same for the speaking test. So whichever paper you're preparing for, this Facebook Live will answer, hopefully, will answer some of your questions, if not all of them. So the speaking test is 15 minutes long and it's got 3 parts to it. In this live, we're going to go through each part separately, and I'll be giving you some hints and tips for how to prepare for each part. So the first part, just as an overview, the first part is questions. Second part is a short presentation, and the third part is more of a discussion. The speaking tests are recorded. So it's you and an examiner. There are no other students in the room. There are no other examiners in the room, but it is recorded so that it's there if there are any questions. Okay, so how formal do you have to be in the speaking test? That's a question that lots of people will ask. Well, I would suggest that you talk to the examiner as if they were your teacher or your university professor. So that level of formality. So not too much slang, but you're not talking to the Queen, okay? So you just polite English. What to wear, we just talked about that. So you need to be comfortable and confident. So whatever you feel most comfortable in, that's what you should wear, okay? From a full suit to jeans and a t-shirt. It's entirely up to you. So if you're just joining us, from Singapore, from Saudi Arabia, no, you're coming from all over the place. So we're going to be talking about the IELTS speaking test, and we're going to be doing each part individually, and then the full video is going to be available later. Okay, so don't worry if you feel like you've missed something already. You haven't. Okay, so on the day of your test, here are some bits of advice I've got for you. So arrive early so that you're not in a fluster and a panic when you get there. Go to the loo. Okay, nobody needs to be panicking halfway through their speaking test that they need to use the bathroom. Have a drink. I've got my drink here. When you're talking a lot, you do need to have a drink, and take some deep breaths and calm, okay, so that you can relax before you go in. Remember, everybody involved in IELTS wants you to do the best job you can. The examiner, the administrator, we all want you to do the best you can. So we're all on your side and we're all rooting for you. Right. Okay. Oh, I've got some information coming up on the screen. All right, so let's have a look at each part in more detail now. So we're going to start with part 1. Excuse me if I'm looking down at my notes, but I don't want to forget something important, okay? So when you walk into the room, smile and say hello. That seems like a very obvious piece of information, but lots of people forget to do it, and it gives a very good first impression, and it makes you feel like you're in control and gives you confidence, okay? So smile, make eye contact, and say hello to the examiner. They're there to help you do the best you can. They're not there to catch you out. So there'll be a friendly smile waiting for you when you walk in the room. Okay, the examiner will check your name, and then once all of that is organized and they're sure that you are who they're expecting, the exam will begin. Part 1 is questions, not a discussion, it's questions, Q&A. The examiner will ask you questions and you'll give an answer. Then the examiner will ask you another question and you'll give another answer. Okay, they're normally on very familiar topics, things like work, study, free time, sport, family, friends, food, these kind of everyday topics. So you don't need to worry too much about it. So let's think about an example question. An example question would be, do you work or do you study? You might say, I work. Is that showing how much English that you have? It's not really enough. Although it's a true answer, it's not going to be enough to get you that top mark that you're looking for. So we need to expand our answer. So for example, you might say, I work as a doctor in the hospital on the other side of town. I started working there 3 years ago. It's a hard job, but I really like it. Okay, 3 sentences, none of it too difficult, but you've really expanded and you've really shown the examiner that you have a range. of vocabulary and that you can use different structures. So how would you answer that question? Have a little think now. Maybe write it in the comments. Do you work or do you study? Okay, if you've just joined us, we're here talking about part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. We've had a small overview and we're now into the middle of part 1, but don't worry, you can watch the whole recording later on the Facebook page. All right, so I asked you a question. Do you work or do you study? Try to answer the question with about 2 to 4 sentences. You could add reasons, so why? So you can give opinions. I love my job because. Add extra details. So I'm studying. Currently, I'm an undergraduate student at university. I'm following a degree in philosophy. It's fantastic. It's the best thing I've ever done. Okay, another question for you to think about. Where do you live? Take a moment to think about that. How would you answer that question? Okay, so the question I asked was, where do you live? I could say I live in London, but again, it's not that good of an answer. What I need to do is show off my English. I need to add some more detail. So I might say something like, I live in a small town outside of London. It's a commuter town. Most people who live here work in London. I live with my family and I live near to my extended family. I live in a house on the hill with a fantastic view, which I love looking at every day. Okay, so think about how you would answer those questions for yourself. The common topics for part 1 include things like sport, work, studies, your hometown, your free time, things like what do you like to do in your free time? You need to give a fuller answer than I like swimming. Okay? So if you find some examples of questions online, part 1 questions, you can go onto Google and find lots of questions, IELTS past paper questions, or on the Cambridge website, the IELTS official website. And you can practice giving these 3 to 4 sentence answers, or maybe 2 sentence answers, but definitely not one word and not a short, simple sentence. You need to add some details, add some interesting stuff. Okay. So welcome to any of you who have just joined us. We're talking about part 1 of the speaking test. And I've just been explaining that you need to practice and you need to look for some example questions online. And I think there's going to be a link in the comments any moment now. And take some time to think about how you'd answer those questions. But don't memorize answers because the questions will be slightly different every time. And a memorized answer often doesn't actually answer the question you're being asked. Okay, and so you'll lose marks. All right then. So let's summarize part 1. Here's a list of do's and don'ts. Okay. Do, smile, make eye contact and relax. Okay. Very, very important that you remain relaxed and calm all the time. Do, expand your answers with extra details. So reasons, opinions, extra information. Show your range of grammar. Show your range of vocabulary. Okay. I live in a lovely house on a hill, but I would like to live in an even bigger house on an even bigger hill, for example. Practice answering lots of questions before the test. You can do this by yourself, record yourself, talk to yourself in the mirror. Try to answer them out loud though, and not just in your head, because it's good practice. Or if you've got a friend who speaks English or who is also studying for IELTS, or you find a study buddy online, then why not practice together? Take turns being the examiner and the test taker and ask each other questions backwards and forwards. Remember as well that the examiner wants you to do well. Okay. And if you don't understand a question, you can always ask them to repeat it. That's okay. They're there to help you get the best score you can get. Right, on to the don'ts. Don't memorize answers. The questions will be slightly different, and your answer will then become not the correct answer to that question. Don't mumble and look at the floor, no matter how nervous you are. If the examiner can't hear what you're saying or can't understand what you're saying, they can't give you a good mark. So you have to make sure that that you're being clear. Don't speak too slowly, but speak at a decent, slow speed, and make sure you don't mumble. Enunciate your words clearly, okay? Don't go on and on. Don't answer the first question, where do you live, with 3 paragraphs, and then you run out of time to answer any of the other questions. It's a questions and answers, a bit like a tennis game, backwards and forwards, okay? And whatever you do, don't panic. If you don't understand, that's okay. Just ask the examiner to repeat the question, okay? Sometimes we don't hear something. It's fine. Okay, so if you're just joining us now, welcome. We've just had a general overview of the IELTS speaking test, and we've been talking about part 1. I've asked those of you watching to think about a couple of questions, example questions, and how you might answer them. And we've done a few do's and don'ts. And if you've missed any of that, then you can watch it again later, no problem. It's all being recorded, and it will be on the Facebook page later on today. So you can watch it in full as many times as you want, take some notes if there's anything interesting. Okay, so let me have a little bit of water. Right, so we've done part 1. Let's move on now to part 2. Okay, let me get my part 2 notes ready. Okay, so in part 2 of the IELTS test, in both academic and general, you have to give a 1 to 2 minute presentation or talk on a topic, and you get given the topic in the exam itself. So this is not something that you get beforehand and prepare. This is something that you prepare during the test, okay? So a question that I'm often asked is, who chooses this topic? Is it the examiner? When you come into the room, do they look at you and think, oh, that person looks like? No, it's come from Cambridge, from the IELTS exam board. They send it to the exam centre. It's all very high security, sealed. The examiners don't see it beforehand. Nobody gets to see the exam before the day. So the examiner has a script, and they have a question that they have to ask you. They have a topic they have to put to you. Okay, so don't get cross or upset if you think the examiner's given you an unfair topic, that it's not a choice that they make, okay? So the examiner will hand you a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, you will have the outline of part 2, the topic that you've got to talk about. And you'll have paper and pencil to make some notes. And you will have 1 minute to prepare. Now, 1 minute's not actually a very long time. So we need to have some kind of plan in place. If we're gonna do well in part 2, be able to talk for a full 2 minutes, then we need to have practiced quite hard. So I'm going to talk you through the process and give you some hints and tips of how you can practice before the test, so that you can improve your chances of doing well. Lots of people find part 2 really nerve-wracking, but we just need an approach, okay? So here is an example task that we have put on the Facebook page about a year ago. Thank you, SJ. So we can see here, it says, describe a photograph that you remember well. You should say when it was taken, where it was taken, and why you remember this photograph. Okay, so just stop and think about that for a moment. Okay, have you got a photograph in your mind that you're thinking of right now? I hope so, I have. Now, we've got to talk for 2 minutes on this topic, so it would be very easy to say, I remember a photograph of me and my sister playing that was taken when I was about 5. in a station somewhere and I remember this photograph because we were having a good time. That's not 2 minutes. Although I have fulfilled all of the points on the task paper. So we need to, obviously from this, we can see that we need to expand our answer. So we've got 1 minute to make notes. 1 minute's not long enough to write out full sentences for a 2-minute presentation. So what you need to do is think about these key points that you're going to cover and make some notes of some keywords, some key ideas that you want to add in to tell the story of this topic. Okay. So SJ, if you could show the next slide, that would be great. Okay, so here are my notes in the black. Okay. So you can see I've not written very much, just a few words. And I told you a lot of it already, but in a very short way. But at the bottom, why do you remember this photograph? You can see I've added some random, what appear to be random notes. Okay, but these notes are prompts to remind me of the stories surrounding this photograph. So I'm not going to do the 2-minute talk right now, but you can see that I can't remember whether it was in Switzerland or France. Now, is it a problem if you don't tell the whole truth in your IELTS exams? Well, especially in the speaking test, it doesn't matter at all, because we're not here to tell the truth. We're here to show our English. So if I am making my notes and I can't remember, oh goodness, was that in a train station in Switzerland or was it in France? It doesn't really matter. I can either say, I don't remember, it might have been Switzerland, it might have been France. That year we drove through both of those countries, or I might just choose one. Nobody at any point is going to phone my family and say, was Emma really in a train station in France when she was 6 years old? Is this true? Is this where that photograph happened? Nobody's going to do that. So what I need to do is remember to use as much truth as I can, because it's always easier to tell a true story, but then I can embellish it and add details and give it some more interesting aspects that aren't maybe not quite exactly true. Okay, so if any of you have joined us right now, we are just talking about a part 2 task. On the screen you can see my notes, but the white writing is the task. The black writing would be the notes I would use if I was going to be giving a 2-minute presentation using this task. And if you want to look back at the rest of the video, you can watch it later on. It's all being recorded, so you can see what we've talked about up until this point, but welcome anyway. Okay, let me find my place in my notes now. Okay, so in part 2, you need to speak clearly, you need to not rush, you need to use linkers to link your ideas together so that it's a coherent story that you're telling. And you need to add details, because the prompt is a structure to help you to organize your ideas, but it's not going to be enough just to answer those questions. Okay, so you need to add information, you need to add ideas, details, opinions. Okay, so during your presentation, so after your 1 minute of preparation time, the examiner will say, okay, your 1 minute of preparation time is over. Could you please start when you're ready? Okay. I think that you have to remember as well that the examiner is going to be taking notes. So even though you're giving your presentation and you'll think the examiner's not listening, they are, but they need to write down notes so that they can give you the correct band score at the end of the exam. So throughout the speaking test, actually, the examiner might be scribbling things down, and don't be put off by this. It's just them doing their job. Okay, they need to make a note so they can remember all the good bits of your speaking test. Okay, so how do we prepare then for this part 2? So you need to know how long 2 minutes is and what it feels like to talk for 2 minutes. It's actually quite a long time if you don't have anything to say. Okay, so number 1, we need to know how long 2 minutes is. So we can do that by timing ourselves doing past papers. So practice, practice, practice. But make sure you set an alarm so that you know when 2 minutes is up. Okay, and you'll start to get a feeling for how long 2 minutes is. Practice lots of different questions, because what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to think on your feet. You've got 1 minute to come up with 2 minutes talking about a topic that you're given. So you need to be able to adapt your ideas very quickly. You might be asked to talk about a person who inspires you, a teacher you remember well, a friend who's very important to you, somebody who's been important to you throughout your life. You can use the same person to answer any of those questions. You just need to change the details ever so slightly. So don't worry if they say, tell us about a teacher, and you can't think of a teacher, but you can think of a sports coach, or you can think of an uncle or an aunt who has inspired you over the years to do the best you can. That doesn't matter. You can say, this person has been like a teacher for me. Or you can just pretend they were your teacher and slightly adapt the truth to help it fit the topic. Because at the end of the day, you need to use your best English, not your best facts, okay? And remember to use linkers when you're speaking so that your story flows well and you don't go off on random tangents on unconnected ideas, okay? And another piece of advice I would probably give to people preparing for the IELTS speaking test is don't try to put idioms and very advanced vocabulary into your speaking test because you've learnt them. If you're very confident that you're using them in the right way, fine. But if you've just learnt 6 idioms because somebody told you that using idioms will get you a higher score, that's not true. Okay, if they're used correctly, fantastic. But if they're not used correctly, it's better not to have used them at all. Okay? So stick with the language that you're confident using. Okay, finally, the examiner will stop you after the 2 minutes are up. So you don't have to worry about looking at a clock or using a stopwatch or having, panicking, have I spoken for 2 minutes or not? Keep going and the examiner will stop you. And if you completely run out of things to say, that's fine too. You finish and the examiner will follow up with some questions. Okay, so it's 1 to 2 minutes. Better if you can speak for 2 minutes, of course, because then you're showing more English. But if you can't, you can't. Okay, just do the best you can. That's all anyone's asking of you. All right then, so welcome to anyone who's just joined us. We're here, we've spoken about an overview. We've talked about part 1 of the IELTS speaking test, and we've talked about part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. I'll be taking some questions later. I won't be able to answer all of your questions because I'm sure there will be lots, but I will try my best, and any others will be followed up on the Facebook page later today, hopefully. Okay. So the last part of the test, part 3. This is a part of the test that some people panic about as well, because it's hard. It is hard. It's a hard part of the test, and I'll let you into a secret. I gave my husband an IELTS speaking test last night because he was asking, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you preparing for? And I said I was preparing for this Facebook Live. And he said, oh, well, what's in an IELTS speaking test then? So I gave him some of the questions, and he struggled because he hasn't had any practice. He's a native speaker, but he hasn't practiced, and he found it very difficult as well. So you're not alone. It's all about understanding the questions that you're, or knowing, sorry, what questions to expect, how the test is organised, and what you're expected to do to fulfil the questions, okay? So the last part of the test is part 3. This is sometimes called the discussion part, because the examiner might talk back with you, but it could just be questions and answers, okay? Sometimes the examiner will discuss with you, sometimes they won't. So this final part of the test also takes about 4 to 5 minutes. So we're coming to our 15-minute mark then. It's a chance to talk about things in a more in-depth way, to give your opinions and your ideas about things, okay? The examiner will ask you some questions that are linked somehow to the part 2, the topic from part 2. So whatever the topic was in part 2, the part 3 discussion will be linked in some way to that. It might not be a very direct link, but it will be linked in some way. So for us today, our part 2 question was about a photograph. And so our part 3 question might be, and we were talking about a photograph you remembered well and why you remembered it. So in part 3, we may have questions that are about photography, about memories, anything like that that's linked to that topic. So let's have a look at an example. Oh, hold on. Before we do that, and a very frequently asked question is, what do I do if I don't understand the question, especially in part 3, because the questions can be a little bit longer and a little bit more complicated than part 1. Well, if you don't understand the question, simply ask the examiner to repeat. And if there is a particular word that you don't understand in the question, you can ask the examiner to clarify it. You can't do this for every single word and every single question, but if you genuinely have misheard or misunderstood a question, you can ask the examiner to clarify. That's okay. So you must answer every question. You must try at least to answer every question that you're asked, okay? You can't just say, oh, I don't know, okay? You need to communicate your opinions and your ideas. If you don't really know very much about the topic that you're speaking about, you can answer a question with, well, I don't really know very much about this topic, but I think, and that's okay. Native speakers speak like that all the time, okay? Because we can't be experts in everything, can we? So part 3 is more in depth. You'll be asked for your opinions. You might be asked for the advantages and disadvantages. You might be asked how something has changed over time, or you might be asked for developments that you have seen in your country, or changes that you've seen in your country. Okay, if it's an opinion, it can't be wrong. You're not being marked on your ideas or your opinions. You're being marked on how well you can communicate your ideas, your opinions, and your beliefs, okay? Not on what they are. So if you disagree with something the examiner has said, you're perfectly able to say, no, I don't agree with that. I believe that, or in my opinion, or I feel very strongly that the opposite is true. That's fine, okay? There's not a right or wrong opinion. Okay, so let's look at some possible questions following our part 2. So, a possible question could be, how has modern technology changed the way that we take photographs? Have a think about that. How would you answer that question? How has modern technology changed the way we take photographs? Now remember, this part of the test is where you're giving your opinions, you're expanding your ideas. It's almost like a mini presentation. So give your opinions. Is it good? Is it bad? Add examples of why you have those ideas. Give reasons for your opinions. Convince the examiner of your point of view. So if you want to write an answer in the comments to have a go, then feel free. Okay, another question that you might get asked in this, when we're talking about photographs, are what are the advantages and disadvantages of taking photographs? You might want to talk about how taking more photographs has made them less meaningful. Or you might want to talk about how wonderful it is that we are now able to take photographs of everything without having to send them off for development. And we can see, one of the advantages is that we can reflect on what we've done almost instantly. But the disadvantage is that we have lost our ability to wait patiently for a set of photographs to come in the post like they used to, for example. So how can you prepare for part 3 of the test? Well, it's a little bit like preparing for the writing test, actually, or the reading or the listening. You need to be informed. You need to have ideas. You need to have opinions. So I would say to read a lot. Okay, read newspapers, journals, magazines, websites. Go onto the BBC website and have a look at all the different sections. Just get ideas flowing so that you have the vocabulary in English. You have some opinions, because sometimes we don't know much about a topic. If we read about it, we can inform ourselves. Okay. I would also say, remember all the work you're doing to prepare for your writing test. Remember the work that you're doing, especially preparing for writing part 2, advantage, disadvantage essays, all this kind of stuff. You can use all of that wonderful language that you're learning, all of those cohesive devices and all of the enriched vocabulary that you're putting into your writing. You can use it in your speaking test. Okay, they're not different to each other. It's the same English, you're just using it in a different context. So you know so much more than you think you know. Don't be afraid to have opinions. Don't worry that the examiner won't agree with you or will judge you for your opinion. They won't. Okay, that's not what they're there for. They're there to listen to your English. They have no judgment of your opinions. And every time you do a practice part 2 question, so you've got your timer, you've got your task 2, you're practicing your 2-minute presentation, because everybody practices those a lot. Remember, also practice some follow-up questions from part 3 style questions, okay? And that will get you into the habit of thinking on those lines. Okay, so I know some of you are taking your test tomorrow, so good luck with that. The rest of the day, I want you to immerse yourself in good English, have a good dinner, have a good night's sleep, a nice breakfast, and then do your absolute best you can tomorrow. Nobody can ask more of you than that, okay? Just try your best. All right, good luck, everyone. And SJ?
Hello. I am back. And for those of you who have just joined us, we've come to the end of our speaking test tips from Emma Cosgrave, who is our IELTS specialist and expert. Now, don't worry, the whole presentation that she's done, all her tips, everything that she's talked about is going to be on our Facebook wall, so you can come back whenever to listen to it all again. Or if you missed any of it, you can catch up on anything that you've missed. Now, I know you're very excited. We do have a lot of questions that a lot of people have asked. So they've, I think you did a fantastic job. I mean, it was really, really helpful. We've had a lot of comments saying that, it's been really, really helpful. But we have a lot of questions covering the whole range of topics. So I'm going to tackle one question, which is, does accent matter?
No, accent doesn't matter, so long as you can be understood. Okay, if your accent is so strong that you can't be understood, then of course that is going to impact how easy it is for you to communicate. But you're not expected to have a British accent or an American accent or an Australian accent. Just make sure that your pronunciation is clear and the examiner can understand what you're saying. Because, you know, when you move into the English speaking environment for work or for study or whatever you're taking your IELTS for, it's going to be very important that people can understand you there as well. But you don't need to have a British or American accent.
So how would you go about practicing your enunciation and pronunciation?
Listening to good, clear English is a very good starting point. And speak as much as you can. Talk to yourself. As you're walking down the street, have a chat, comment on what you can see, because the more you practice, you've got to practice making those shapes with your mouth. You've got to use different muscles. Speaking different languages, using different accent, uses different facial muscles. And like anything, you need to train yourself. So listening to people, repeating what they say, recording yourself, and then listening back critically and going, right, okay, that bit doesn't sound very good. I need to really practice those sounds. And you can find on the phonemic chart, you can find websites which have some videos of people pronouncing different sounds. If you have a particular problem with sound, you can find a video of somebody making the right shapes with their mouth, and you have to practice in a mirror and train your mouth to make those shapes. It's as simple as that sometimes.
Doing selfie videos would help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be, that's very helpful. Okay. So I've asked about practicing and how you would help with enunciation and pronunciation. So in terms of improving, one of the questions that was asked was, how would you improve fluency? That's not quite the same thing as enunciation and pronunciation. So I guess, you know, that's, how would you do that? How would you help to improve your fluency? Practice.
You need to speak English as much as you possibly can, whenever you possibly can, because if you only do something for half an hour once a week, or you go to English class once a week, you're in a 2-hour class, and of that 2 hours, you maybe are actually speaking for half an hour.
Right.
And so actually, when you think about it on that level, you're not practicing very much. And so fluency is that confidence to just keep going and to pause like I'm pausing now, but to keep talking and not lose the thread. Yes. As well. That's very important. So practice. Find a study.
So one of the things to help improve fluency is also improving vocabulary.
Yes.
So one of the questions we've been asked as well is, how does one improve vocabulary?
Well, it's difficult. It's hard. There's no easy fix. You need to meter words lots of times. So you need to hear it, you need to see it, you need to say it, you need to use it in context, you need to keep a vocabulary notebook, you need to write a translation, draw a picture, use a monolingual dictionary, use chunking. So learn the word in a chunk of language so that you can then use it in a sentence more easily. Basically, you can't just look at a list of words, memorize them, and then expect to be able to use them. You actually need to use that word in different contexts, in different ways, and you need to actively notice. So if you're watching a video just for enjoyment, fine, just watch it for enjoyment. But if you're watching a video and you want to, or a movie or something, and through doing that activity, you're hoping to improve your vocabulary, then you need to actively try to improve your vocabulary. So you need to pause, make a note of a new word, listen out for it being said again, look it up in the dictionary. You know, you can't just sit back and expect vocabulary to magically lodge itself in your brain. You have to train yourself and learn the new words, actively learn them.
Okay, that's really good. And that's useful advice for anybody, to improve their language skills, no matter what language you're learning. Another question that we've asked is actually topic specific to the test.
Okay.
So I think this probably applies to part 2 and 3, which is, I think you did answer before, but what do you do if you don't know the topic for part 2? So, I mean, we've said before when you were talking about part 2 and 3, that part 3 is linked to part 2 in some way. So what if it's the topic in part 2 that you don't know anything about?
Well, the topic in part 2 will probably, I mean, the exam is designed so that you don't have to be a specialist to answer any of the questions. So there should be a way that you can approach the questions from your own personal experience. Hopefully part 2, so part 2 you'll be able to use your own life experience more likely than not. And then in part 3, yes, it does get difficult. And this is where having an opinion and being able to express an opinion and having a good, well-rounded sort of general knowledge and a little bit of an idea about lots of things helps, so that you can just express. You need to practice being able to talk about anything and everything.
Yes, I think you gave some excellent advice on how to do that, which is read a lot, read widely, and read and be informed. So being informed will help you form opinions if you gain a lot more knowledge about a wide range of topics. But say you do come up with a stumper, you know, and so a couple of questions have come in saying, can you actually request to change the topic in part 3?
Not that I'm aware of. That's something that perhaps at IELTS headquarters you can double check for me, but I believe that you can't. So you have to find a way around it. So I mean, one idea would be to say, well, I don't know very much about X, but I think Y is related because, and try to turn it around to talking about something you do know about, if you can relate it in some way.
Okay.
But yeah, being sort of having the confidence to have an opinion.
Yes.
Because you're not being marked on your opinions. So you can just, as long as you can say it in English, in good English and clear and communicate your ideas, you can kind of have any old crazy opinion.
And as you said before,
crazy. But yeah, it's difficult. Don't panic. Stop. Think clearly. Most people know something about most things.
Yes.
And if you just stop and take a breath,
you'll find that you actually do know something.
You actually do have an opinion on most things.
Along with the actual test itself, what if you fumble? Do you get penalized for fumbling? Are there penalties for taking long pauses? What
if you don't take too many long pauses, yeah, because you won't. The test is only 15 minutes. So if you spend 5 minutes in, over the course of the 15 minutes pausing, then you're not going to get enough words out. It's as simple as that. That's the maths of it, is that you need to be talking for most of that time to be able to show your level of English.
Yes. And along with that, I mean, you have to show confidence. So making eye contact is a good thing. So, being able to be confident enough to make eye contact.
But if you make a mistake, you can go back and correct yourself. You're saying something and you've got you realize you've used the wrong word, or if you don't know the exact piece of vocabulary, work around it. Explain what you're trying to say. Use a synonym. Use, all of these things are good things to be able to do in the language, because it shows that your flexibility. It shows that you have a wide range of vocabulary that you can get around. I mean, native speakers often can't put their finger just on the word they need. And so you have to explain what you're trying to say, because you've forgotten the word that you're looking for. So you don't just stop and go, oh, I've forgotten the word, can't possibly say anything. I have to just sit in silence. You find a way around it.
So my next questions are about targeting particular bands. And
Okay.
so, I've been asked, how do we get up to a band 7 or 8? How do we practice speaking to get up to band 7 and 8? What do we have to do to get to 7 and 8?
Well, I would say one of the mistakes people make is that they try to use language that's beyond them. So they try to use fancy words and fancy structures and idioms when they're not appropriate. And if you use that kind of language wrongly, or it's not in a full structure and all right, or all the grammar around it and everything is right, it actually is glaringly bad, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's worse to use an idiom wrongly or to use very advanced language if it doesn't fit in with everything else you've been saying. Then it kind of stands out as something that's wrong, or that you've memorized, or you've tried to, what we say in English, like shoehorn it in. You've tried to, whatever happens, I will use these 7 phrases in my speaking test, whatever the questions are. And people do that, and you don't get better marks for that. So I would avoid that. Clear communication is how you get a good mark, actually.
We did have a question, 2 questions sort of came side by side, or one after the other. So yes, a broad vocabulary does play an important part in IELTS speaking, because you need to show a range of vocabulary, but that's different from using fancy words, isn't it?
Yes. So for example, if you're talking about your home, if you're saying we were talking about where you live, if you instead of just saying home, my home is nice, my street is nice, or I live in, that basic vocabulary, you need to have a range. So community, neighborhood, neighbors, street, house, next door, adjoining, terraced house, all that variety of language. So, and knowing synonyms, knowing collocations, getting your collocations right. So words that go together.
And linkers.
And linkers, yes.
Yeah. So I guess another question was, is it okay to speak plain and simple English? Well, yes, it is. Yeah. But like I said, it's a bit different from plain and
simple English. Plain and simple English that communicates your ideas using the right word for the right situation is fine. But it's just, I like bananas, I live in a town, too simple, of course, that's not going to show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what you're trying to achieve. I mean, the end goal is to get a 9. Not people don't get 9s generally, but that's native speaker. Native speakers don't use overly complicated language, but they do have the right word for the right situation. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a particularly fancy construction, or subclause after subclause after subclause.
And I couldn't even think of an example of a subclause after subclause after subclause. I mean, that would be quite a complicated sentence. Okay, we have less than 5 minutes left. So I'm going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up the session. For those of you who have missed any of what we've been talking about, don't worry. The session's being recorded. All of Emma's fantastic tips and overview of the speaking test is going to be on our Facebook wall. So if you have any questions that we haven't answered during this live session, we will try and get to you as quickly as we can, and as many of you as we can. And for those questions that we can't answer immediately, we will get back to you as soon as we can. So 2 more questions. I think we've answered most of them. It's mostly about practicing and how to practice and how to improve fluency, really. Are there any particular topics to watch out for, or that any particular common topics that are good to practice?
Well, for part 1, like hometown, comparing your hometown and the town that you're in might come up, or sports, free time activities. Would you, do you have any pets? All this kind of everyday stuff. What kind of food do you like to eat? What do you go out to restaurants often with friends? That kind of thing, everyday stuff.
Yes.
There are only so many. Nothing is going to be very, very, very recent. You don't need to be on top of current affairs, for example, because the test writing process the tests are written very carefully so that people across the globe can take the same test. So somebody living in Australia, somebody living in Canada, somebody living in India, somebody living in Cambodia, they're all going to get the same questions. So when you think about, you don't have to worry about current affairs particularly. You don't have to worry about very advanced or recent technologies. They're going to be a more general, do the use of digital cameras, movies, books, films, food, sport, exercise, education, transport, all the things that are common to all countries, healthcare systems, those kinds of things that are common to all of us are topics that come up a lot.
Okay, so we've run out of time now. So for those of you who are taking the test tomorrow, our top tips are: get a good night's sleep. For the rest of today, what do we do?
Immerse yourself in good English.
Yes. Go and have a look at this whole Facebook Live session again. That's probably a good thing. And make sure, yes, have a good night's sleep. And very, very best of luck in your test tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us, Emma. Thank you for all your great tips,
for having me.
all your help. All right. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.